So welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you here for this Next Economy MBA Q&A session. And feel free to share your location in the chat. My name is Erin Axelrod, a partner at Lyft Economy, and I am calling in from unceded Ohlone territory in the San Francisco Bay Area. This will be recorded and shared after with everyone who's registered. And we wanted to just do a brief intro of what is the Next Economy MBA and why are we doing this. Then we'll go ahead and do Lyft facilitator intros. We have Susie on the line who has been through the program and is going to share a little bit about her experience. And then we're going to go into live questions. So that's the kind of arc of this journey together on this call today. So what is the Next Economy MBA? Why did we create this program? Why are we doing this? Why are we all here? Thank you all for being here, by the way. So Lyft has been around for over a decade. And through that time, we've had the privilege of working with hundreds of social enterprises, organizations that are really questioning, how do we create an economy that works for everyone with no one left out? And so in that time, we've had the honor of working with folks, and we've created our consulting methodology. And through that process, we found people were asking us questions like, I'm just starting an organization. I don't really have the capacity to invest in consulting, but I'd love to learn from you. And so we're getting enough of those requests that we opted to create a one-to-many approach to teaching what we were learning. Fast forward to today, we have more than 500 alumni that have gone through the program. And really who this is for are team members or entrepreneurs that are involved in Next Economy organizations, individuals that might be looking to transition to the Next Economy or bring Next Economy values into their current work. Folks looking to invest in this Next Economy, whether that be their time, energy, financial resources, and so many more. So with that, I'm going to pass to Kevin to kick us off with our Lyft facilitator intros. And Kevin, take it away and feel free to add anything I missed.
Didn't miss anything, Erin. Hi, everybody. Kevin Bayuk here, pronoun he, him. I am a worker owner and one of the co-founders at Lyft Economy. And my passion is numerous. Passion about learning and supporting and helping us orient as a society towards an economy that works for the benefit of all life. And I do that with a lot of emphasis on transforming the nature of capital. How do we do investment and fundraising and capital formation to dismantle the exploitation tendencies of the business as usual economy? I also do a lot of work in climate change and ecosystem restoration. And a lot of my work day to day at Lyft is supporting complex economic development projects, which usually involve nonprofits and social enterprises and co-ops and the like. And I have an ancient history background as a tech entrepreneur, right? And made a big hard turn into ecosystemic design and permaculture and education. And so I kind of try and marry those two past lives in the work at Lyft Economy. Pass it to Sean.
Got it. Hey, everybody. Happy to be here. Happy to see Katrina, smiling face. Amazing. Yeah, Sean Berry, he, him. I'm on Lenape land in the mid-Hudson Valley, maybe near David Todd. I don't know. I'm near Kingston, New York. Nice to meet folks nearby and from far away. Let's see. I'm also a co-founder at Lyft Economy, worker owner. I'm a serial cooperator, been cooperating for my entire career and intend to continue to do so. let's see, on the Lyft team, am working with a lot of cooperatives, small teams. I'm also on the B Corp team. My work as of late has to do, I'm doing a lot of like retreat planning, facilitation, also ownership succession. Those are just kind of a couple current themes. And also the MBA program, which I greatly enjoy. So yes, very happy to be here. And I'm gonna pass to Jeanette.
Thanks, Sean. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeanette. I use she, they pronouns on unceded Multnomah and Cowlitz land in Portland, Oregon. I am the newest-ish member of the Lyft Economy team. I joined in October of last year. My background is in the intersection of storytelling, which most people call marketing, and impact. So I've had experience working with nonprofits, startups, for-profit enterprises through the lens of authentic storytelling. I think that we're all really tired of marketing as usual, but are looking for ways to find community and connection. And so I'm doing that at the Lyft team. So if you received an email from me at any point, I'm sorry and thank you for reading it. But I also get to do that with some of our impact clients as well, which is really, really valuable and super rewarding. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Erin.
Thanks all. And just by way of a little bit more introduction about my experience as a worker owner partner at Lyft, my particular passion and specialization in the consulting work I do is working with entrepreneurs that are rethinking the way we can fulfill our material culture needs, our food, our water, our shelter, our clothing. Working on a really cool project right now that'll, in just a few weeks' time, we're actually going to be launching a hemp tool bag that it'll be the first line of the first domestically grown hemp to be included ever in Patagonia's line of products. And that hemp was grown domestically by an indigenous community in northern Minnesota, the Anishinaabe people who Lyft has had the privilege of working with for the past 5 years to grow hemp regeneratively and really put forward this vision of clothing that is not based in fossil fuel derived synthetics, but clothing and garments and fibers that are based in regenerative natural fibers. So that's just an example of one of the projects I work on. I also work with fisher folk that are looking to transition into restorative seaweed and kelp farming to heal our oceans. And I have a background in agroecology and helping households transition their personal practices to be much more regenerative and beneficial using gray water systems, composting toilet, backyard chickens, all of that. So I bring all of that to my work with creating sustainable social enterprises. I did want to mention one of our amazing partners who is not on the call today, Phoenix Soleil, who is a core facilitator of this project, of this learning journey. And Phoenix actually prioritizes retreat and her Dharma practice. So that is where she is. So she's here in spirit with us, but not on the Zoom channel. And Phoenix's work with companies and organizations is really rooted in anti-oppression, nonviolent communication, play, joy, improv, bringing in the really critical cultural foundational pieces of how we can remake how we grow things, how we make things, but if we're not remaking how we relate to one another as people, we're not solving anything. And so Phoenix brings that to the facilitation training and has transformed our Lyft economy culture as well to be able to facilitate the work we do. So she's sorry she's missing today, but she'll be there in September for the learning journey. I think with that, shall I pass to Susie? Did I miss anything, facilitators, before we pass to Susie? So this is an incredible opportunity. Susie, thank you so much for being on the call with us. We're gonna ask Susie, you just to share your experience with the program, if there's any like things that you would ask people thinking about joining the program to think about, why they might want to consider joining us. And then we'll also give a little bit of space. Folks may have questions for you right after you share, so we'll give a little space for that. So without further ado, I'll pass it to Susie.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Erin. I'm calling in from Maine, which is land of the Wabanaki, and I'm in my kitchen at the moment. So thanks for letting me blend home and work. I run a video company that is also a B Corp. And so I had heard about the B Corp values and the way of approaching business and capitalism years ago. And at a B Corp event, I actually met Allison, who works for Lyft as well. And I believe she's a Lyft partner as well now. And so I learned about this program. And actually, a mentor of mine here had also participated. So I was sort of it kept kind of like coming up. And I'll just quickly tell you guys my overview impressions, and you guys can ask questions. I am a full-time working person, and number one thing I love that this program could easily integrate into my life. I did not feel like meeting twice a month. It was twice a month, right? Is that right? Essentially, twice a month. Yeah, it just felt like the right amount of time. And the resources that you're exposed to in this course are just things that I certainly would have never found in one place. And just to have them on my radar, it's like this gift that keeps giving, because there's things that I was never able to dive into, as will happen to all of you probably if you're juggling things. But the resources that maybe not only open your mind and are new ways of seeing things, but they also remain a resource to you when you leave. So I just love knowing, like, even though my life is a little crazy at the moment, that all this stuff is there and I can come back to it. And as a business owner who's, we're a small but growing company. And I think it was what really drew me to this course was, if I'm going to build something, I want to build it in a mindful way. And I really wanted to be exposed to other kinds of learnings. Also, the community is just, every group, I'm sure, brings to the table people from across the world, or at least the States. And again, like folks I would have never crossed paths with. So I really enjoy that as well. As far as like stuff or the material that the course covers, it's a really wide range, which I like. So there's like business best practices, there's wider lens approach to capitalism. There's so many examples of this kind of work in practice, and just I feel like the relationship that the Lyft folks have with their impact partners is just so ripe for showcasing. But they also do a great job of showing a lot of other stuff too. So yeah, I guess that's my overview.
Thanks, Susie. I am also in the kitchen, disclaimer, cooking up a big pot of gumbo. My partner and I celebrated our commitment this weekend, so I have tons of leftovers I'm processing. But I wanted to just invite, if folks have questions for Susie, specifically, this is a great opportunity to just ask someone who's been through the program about the facilitation or the experience. So feel free to unmute yourself. You can also drop it in the chat if anyone has questions.
I have a question. To Susie, you said that you had about the right amount of time in the classroom. What about the homework load?
So the homework is optional, I believe, unless there has to be a degree of participation if you're looking to get the certificate, I believe. Am I saying this correct? So, but even that said, the homework, I think it just depends on what you have like going on in your life. There were certain weeks where I was really able to dive in, and there were certain weeks where I wasn't, and that's fine. It was never a hindrance. Again, it's like if you didn't get to read something, it's still there for you to go back and read. And you can still fully participate in class. So, I think it's one of those situations where, you try to come as prepared as possible, but everyone's ready to meet you where you're at.
Thanks.
We had a question from Julie in the chat. Would love to learn more specifics about ongoing access to resources. So, Susie, if you want to take that, and if anyone from the team wants to maybe fill in.
I'm probably not the best person to speak about that, so I might volley that over to someone.
I'll take it. Thanks, Susie. Yeah, so the specifics access to resources, there's multiple types of resources. I'm going to try and weave an answer to some of the preceded questions and responding to this. So we have one set of resources is references, which are podcasts, videos, book excerpts, books, articles, and it's a growing live list, and there's about, I call it like a lifetime of learning. There's over 300 today, and they keep getting added to. In the syllabus for every live facilitated session, those resources are made available. There's a little bit of annotation so you see which ones are directly referenced in the live facilitated sessions and which ones are supplemental. That you have access to that list. Some of them are list created. Some of the resources are what we've gathered from our lived experience and what's inspired our work and from our clients and at partners and so forth. That is available to you always. Another set of resources are the recording. So every session is recorded, both the office hours and the live facilitated sessions. And for your cohort, all of those sessions are available to you forever. They're actually posted to YouTube on an unlisted playlist, so you can reference them as needed in perpetuity. There's a number of templates. So a lot of them are used for the extra fun, as Susie mentioned. All extra fun is optional. All homework, we know there's allergies to the word homework, and we respect that. So the extra fun is available. The templates are available to you, and they're available to be copied. So all of the templates that are referenced throughout the training are open source, meaning they're Creative Commons license. So you could use them for non-commercial purposes. And the request is that you just make a copy of the resource for your own purposes and needs for your organization. Maybe I'll just real quickly show an example of what some of those look like, just so you can kind of get a sense of what is Kevin talking about. So we have like templates like here. This is like for the recruiting, hiring template project plan. So when doing a hiring process, we talk about recruiting and how to develop the must-haves for a role, how to develop your candidate pool, your application format, your connector pool. There's a lot we talk about in terms of recruiting and using values and doing how to recruit in ways to create a more diverse and inclusive team, which includes like reference checking guides and onboarding and ways to take out implicit bias from the recruiting process. We have this kind of sprawling, if you will, org design template for organizing team role and responsibilities. There's guides to how to use these, and they're all optional, but they can be applied to a number of organizational scenarios, whether it's a nonprofit, a co-op, or a social enterprise. All of these are available to you to copy to make your own decision zone chart for the different roles and stakeholders in an organization, what their responsibilities are, what the mechanisms for decision making are. So I'm just kind of highlighting really briefly some of these templates. All these are available to you during the training and in perpetuity after the training. So there's a guide that's offered to the cohort where you can find easy links because there's a lot of information that's available, and there's an index about how to find what you need on an ongoing basis. Sean, Erin, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, the other thing to add, maybe important thing to add is not just the resources are available in perpetuity, but the enrollment in the course or access to the live course, you have a lifetime membership. So once you enroll and you join us, please come back to any future session. We love it. Love to see our alumni like Susie coming back through, and you know, particularly again, because the course covers so much, we understand that it's not all going to be immediately relevant. So kind of come back to the next one. Maybe if you're not doing your financial plan now, come back to the financial planning sessions when you are, and you can jump into the live session, ask questions, jump into the office hours. And so that's a it's a resource for you, but it's also a resource for us, right? Because it's it keeps it a living and active community.
Great, thanks, Sean. So we have a number of pre-seeded questions. Thank you, all of you who contributed questions, and we can dive into those. We always try to privilege the materials of the moment, meaning like something might have occurred to you now, and you might have a question that arose from what you heard already, or you just want to articulate it in your own words rather than what you wrote in ahead of time. So maybe you'll just make space either in the chat or out loud if you want to phrase any questions for the facilitation team. Todd, David Todd, I see you on deck.
Yeah, thank you. I learned about this through a friend, Masharika, who has been a part of a previous cohort. And she mentioned something about affinity groups within. Could you share a little bit more about that, or what existing affinity groups there are, or how those get formed?
Great. Yeah, definitely address affinity groups, and I'll try and weave another preceded question and response into this one. So affinity groups are participant initiated and ultimately participant led, though it's really common for facilitation team members to participate both early on, and there's a couple of them that I participate on regularly. Currently, there are 4 affinity groups, just to give an example of what they are. Affinity groups are open to not only an existing cohort, but the whole alumni community. The examples of the affinity groups include the ones called Building Resilient Communities. I'll describe what that means in a moment. There's one called on Regenerative Finance. There's one on Worker-Owned Cooperatives, and there's one on Regenerative Agriculture. They emerge, and there could be more. They emerge, like I mentioned, from the participants. So somebody says, like, I have an interest in, regenerative fashion or textiles or whole cloth, or I want to understand that world, and that's something I'm passionate about, and I'm running a company. Well, it turns out across the alumni, there's dozens probably of people who have said, I'm interested in that as well. Some of them are starting companies or growing companies or worked in organizations related to that theme. And what we do is we coordinate with the person who says, I really want a regular affinity group. Oftentimes they're monthly. The Building Resilient Communities, when it started, it was twice a month, then went to a monthly cadence. It's kind of what the participants in the of the affinity group feel they want to go, where they want to land on in terms of the cadence. Building Resilient Communities, as an example, is there's a number of people working on commons ownership structures to land holding, so community-owned, community-controlled land for permanent affordability for various uses, whether it's agricultural, housing, as well as there's a number of people who are interested in changing the way how homes are built in terms of materials, so carbon sequestering buildings that in the building of the building, the material use have a beneficial impact on the carbon cycle, biodiversity, etc. Also, people looking at settlement design in particular, so revillaging, co-housing, a number of those themes. And so Building Resilient Communities is kind of a mashup of a number of sub-themes. And so people with that affinity come together once a month and talk about their work. There's no specific facilitation format, but what most of the affinity groups, and maybe Sean or Aaron, if you want to comment differently, the ones I attend, it usually centers around a participant bringing their own work and as a case story, one at a time, and then the rest of the group kind of helps support or process around, oh, have you thought about doing this, or giving either advice if it's invited or feedback and reflection as a sounding board. And oftentimes there's learning. Sometimes affinity groups bring people outside of both the cohort and the alumni, so special guests who are topical experts, if you will. So that's happened in the regenerative finance or the Building Resilient Communities group once. So those are examples of what the affinity groups look like and how they show up. Did that address the thing? Thanks, David. Other questions? Any question is?
Ali has one in the chat
Great.
about, are there any opportunities to meet in person with cohort members or facilitators who are in your area?
Great. Sean, do you want to grab that?
Yeah, I can take that. So we definitely had more activity pre-COVID with that, having events here in Kingston, New York City, also in the Bay Area, and we'd love to pick that up again. So we hope to. It's not formally planned. Certainly participants are welcome to self-organize, and that does and has happened. And it's something I'm very personally interested in, and yeah. Also, I guess we didn't mention, but we are hiring for a community manager role that would help with some of that kind of extra organizing. So that's something we're working on. So we don't know exactly when they'll come in, but we hope to have them in place for this cohort and do more on-person gatherings, because now that we've we have 500 or over 500 in the community, there is nice clusters in a lot of the major metro areas for people to connect. So it's definitely an aspiration, but not specifically planned yet.
And one question we've gotten consistently is, were you always a remote-based or learning experience? And we have, ever since we started this in like 2016, we've always been on Zoom. So even before COVID, and yeah, in addition to the kind of locales that Sean mentioned, there's Atlanta is a hub of our alumni. And there's also international participation, less like alumni networks, but we've had folks participate from Peru and also Australia, New Zealand, UK, Mexico. So there's a smattering of international participation as well, although probably 80% would be, 80 to 85% would be US based, Canada as well.
Ali, how did that land for you?
Can I just add to what Erin was
Oh.
just saying? Because that is actually also a question that I raised, because I'm from Germany. I now live in Denmark. Would you say that the let's say teachings, offerings, the resources would be transferable to a European context, or is it very US based?
We've had, like Erin mentioned, participants from different parts of the world, and the feedback that we've got, and directly we kind of asked them, how did the training, how did it address your needs? And the feedback we got is that the majority of it is a good fit for starting, growing, developing next economy initiatives and institutions around the world. Session 5 in particular, which is about kind of legal incorporation entities, is fairly particular to the United States statutes and so forth. We do, where we know there's parallels in other nation states or other jurisdictions, we kind of like point that out, but we don't have a full lexicon or understanding of all the different statutes around the world for legal entity formation. We do also in session 11 in kind of alternative mechanisms of finance. There are some pieces of that session where there's questions about compliance with regulatory compliance for fundraising, and that also becomes pretty particular to US and the SEC and IRS kind of stuff, taxation, and so that there's some US centric stuff there. The rest of it is probably broadly applicable to whatever bioregion you are in.
Great, thank you so much. Totally understandable also.
Yeah.
I guess you still learn where you have to look, right? And then you learn more. So thank you.
We learn more as we go. So yeah. Sean, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just share that our facilitation team is US based, so a lot of our experience and resources and connections are US based. But of course, the rest of the world is so far ahead in so many other ways. So we definitely are tracking and referring to other projects and teams outside of this country as well. So it's I would just say I think it's an opportunity for improvement for us in the course is to be a little bit more international.
Great. So scanning for additional questions. And we can always go to the preceded questions.
I'm wondering, Kevin, if you can just reiterate, someone had asked on average how many students are in each cohort. Aaron answered usually between 40 to 55, but just wanted to mention that in case someone's not looking at the chat log but is watching the recording.
Yeah, definitely. It can be hard to track chat and the recording. That's a great one. Yeah. And that is slightly going up. So we published a book. Barrett Kohler, the publisher, asked us to write a book about the Next Economy MBA, and that came out in the spring. So the last cohort was the largest one we've had. And so it is creeping up. The average might be changing over time. I see Matthew on stack. Matthew?
Yeah, I was curious about the kind of the diversity of entity types that folks in the MBA program are involved in. So like, is there like sort of like a certain strength of like co-ops, nonprofits, for-profit B Corps, all kind of mashed together? How does that usually look?
Yeah, I can answer that. Yeah, it is a nice mashup, and it's also there's kind of a split between individuals and people in organizations. And yeah, across the organization, I'd say the theme, as opposed to any certain structure or industry, is maybe the size. They tend to be smaller teams, or even if people are in larger organizations, the kind of the content is applicable to a smaller team, whereas sometimes a larger organization, it's not accessible to the team member to change the whole thing at once. But Kevin mentioned we address entity structure in session 5 because it's a question we get up front a lot, and we clearly kind of disambiguate the legal structure and the operational structure. And so there's so much wonderful things happening, such as worker self-directed nonprofits, whereas nonprofits used to be very, very hierarchical, top down, and now there's democratic, decentralized stuff emerging. And so we really see the themes that we teach in the course as applicable kind of regardless how you register with the state, and even applicable to a diversity of operational structures. So it doesn't have to be a completely flat democratic structure, although of course we like to see some elements of democracy or democratic governance built in, but that's the way it's going. Even teams that are single owner, founder, whatever, the trend is to be highly affiliative and connective and deliberative with the teams. So and let's see, a little more color on that. I mean, we definitely get co-ops, but as folks might know, and Matthew, it seems like you might see co-op on your tag. It's a very small sector still, right? So we love co-ops, but definitely B Corps or any kind of structure is welcome. We're more interested on what's the impact you're creating in the world rather than the legal registration.
And when we do see co-ops where they're often worker-owned cooperatives, less platform cooperatives like Savvy, say hi to Jen for me. I haven't talked to Savvy team in a long time. Did that answer land for you, Matthew, in terms of entity types?
It did. Thank you.
Okay. Any Karen?
This is going back to how the classroom online works. Just wanted to ask a little bit. I've done a lot of training online, and some works well and some not so well. So curious about how you manage the classroom online.
Great question. Erin, do you want to chime in? Maybe?
I could speak to that. Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about this. one of the beautiful things about having the classroom online is that we have people from all walks of life and many different regions. So that really, I think, adds a lot to the content. In terms of like facilitating the process for folks, there's a couple strategies we use because it's not a pre-recorded webinar, it's a live session. And so for us, it's really potent and important to have what's alive in the room actually inform and co-develop the curriculum of what's getting taught. So we use a lot of prompts, and we lean heavily on both the chat as well as giving people the opportunity to unmute themselves and respond to those prompts as what shapes kind of the learning experience for the curriculum. You know, there is a set of curriculum that we try to get through during the 90-minute live sessions. And we recognize that there's so much baked into that curriculum that what we want to do is really make it relevant to the folks in the room of like, how is marketing strategy showing up in real time in the organizations that are in the room grappling with the material. And we do that for all of the topics. We also use breakouts rooms. And so we'll, for every session, every live 90-minute session, we'll have a breakout room with a prompt or a hypothetical scenario, and groups of 3 or 4 will kind of tackle that together. So that's another way to build more intimacy with your cohort, build more relationships. And then office hours, which happen on the same week, but on Thursdays, are 60 minutes. And that's much less, much more free form. So we don't have a specific curriculum that we bring to that office hours. That's really driven by student participation and questions. And that's always super vibrant. We've gotten into everything from the meaning of life to the curriculum of the hour, to like real live challenges. How can I raise the $100,000 of capital that I need to grow my business and capitalize? And it's both the facilitators responding to that, but also folks in the cohort responding to that. We use progressive stack as well in the live facilitation. So making sure that, you know, as we're addressing the creation of the next economy, we're not perpetuating the same kind of systems of oppression that have, you know, empowered, you know, white voices, male voices to be more outspoken and more engaged in the work. And let's see, I guess just to speak on that point directly as well, you may have seen that we also have caucus groups, and caucus sessions happen monthly for both white allies and accomplices in their own white ally caucus, and then person of color or people of the global majority caucus group. And the reason I bring that in is because I think it really contributes to our ability to facilitate a live classroom setting that is multiracial, because those caucus groups really support collective learning around how racialized capitalism impacts us and how our positionality impacts the way we show up in this work. And oftentimes those conversations, it's really supportive, for example, for white folks to be talking about racialized capitalism and building their own learning around that, in order to make sure that when we're in a multiracial context, we're not catching people up, we have kind of more shared analysis, and we're spending the time together doing the work of, okay, now that we've grappled with this in our caucus groups, how do we come together and really make the most of the shared time together? We can say more about that. Feel free to, facilitators, pick up anything that I might have missed there.
Thanks, Erin. That's wonderful. And maybe I'll just add like some of the theme, some of what happens in a session. And I will give just tremendous credit to our alumni. We've evolved and really improved the training just based directly on feedback. We get feedback at every session. We read it all and we fold it in, and we're constantly evolving. So like something new that just happened is silent breakout. So folks that they just want, instead of being in in communication in a breakout, they just want to have some silent time. So that's a new thing. But so we start our sessions with some music. You can join early, hear some tunes. Then we, right at the hour, we do a cold open case story. So this organization is doing this thing that's related to the topic of the session. Then we will typically do an arc of the training. So this is where we are in the training. We covered this. We're doing this today. This is what's going to be next. Then we will often have a short breakout or a journaling prompt, sometimes both, sometimes a journaling prompt on the topic, and then a quick like dyad breakout. Then we'll do some content sessions. We try to do 2 breakouts a session, a short one and a longer one. We take a dance break in the middle of the session, again, by popular demand, so we can, shake our bodies and dance about it instead of just thinking too much. So yeah, so those are some of the themes, some of the like different activities in the session. We try to use visuals. The chat log is very active for those people that are interested to do that. So those are some of the elements that we try to make the experience more engaging and stimulating, and also like offering multiple options for different learning types.
Thank you.
How long? The first 2 sessions are 2 hours, and then after that, they're 90 minutes. And the office hours are 60 minutes. And I think affinity group special sessions vary, probably 60 minutes to an hour. And I think the racial caucus are 90 minutes. Yeah, oh, that's right. We often go over, we try to end the session on time and then keep the channel open for people to chat. That's another thing we do.
He been on stack?
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple of questions, all related. One is, would people come in bringing their own projects to work on, or they just come in? Most of people just join the program for the purpose of like a career development. And then also, related question is that the jobs or the things that people will choose to work on, the previous alumni, what type of organizations are they working right now, and what type of roles are they taking, or what and similar impact they're making, overall, like how they leverage what they learned in the program to to really make impact and changes in their community and societies. Like, are there any information about that on your website or somewhere that I can read more, or if you don't mind to share some here, that would be great.
Yes, great. So I heard first, like what people coming into the course, do they have their own initiative? Are they in a career transition, or what stage are they at in terms of who joins? And then when somebody graduates or finishes the program, kind of what do they go on to do? What are the types of impacts that they're having? What kind of roles are they taking on in terms of either their vocational life or in their community? So on the first question, though, maybe I can address the first, and then thanks, Jeanette, for posting a link, and we can share some, maybe a couple stories about the second question. On the first question, there's a mix, and it shifts a little bit cohort to cohort, but if I look at the last 10 cohorts, this is not a scientific analysis, but it is grounded in like some review and discussion and review of the surveys. About 30% of the people who come to the training have something. They're a member of a co-op, or they are starting a they have a nonprofit that they're operating, and they're looking to enhance the impact of what they're doing. Maybe another 30% are at a point of career transition, and so they're working maybe in a larger business as usual context or maybe in a larger nonprofit, and they're like, I want to know what's next for my life, and I want to know what's out there, and they're very interested in the case stories and learning to develop skills and perspective for that next step in their journey. And then there's another third knows they want to start something. They want to start a co-op, or there's an entrepreneurial kind of aspect, and so they're not part of an existing organization, but they're going to want to develop a new initiative, a new offering, a new institution, a new entity. The balance is a mix of people who are maybe in university, and there's an academic kind of interest. There's some people who are investors, impact investors, so they're very interested in seeing what's happening in the world of next economy, institution development, and enterprises. There's a couple of other roles that people kind of show up with. On the what do people go on to do? Well, kind of depends on where they came in. The mix, and again, there's some stories there, highlights that Jeanette posted in the chat. I could tell maybe, or Aaron or Sean or Jeanette, if you wanted to highlight any particular stories that come to mind. But I'll give one example that just there's somebody who's actually a sustainability director in a fairly large entity. It's already having a social impact, but in the training, it's not an uncommon phenomenon. They're like, oh, there's so much more that I want to see this organization doing. And I just had a call, yesterday morning, so it's alive in me, like with a one-on-one call to do some coaching and support. They're like, I want to spend the next couple of years working within this context of a pretty good organization that's doing some impact work, but I want to set myself up for the next big thing. And they're very interested in community-owned, community-controlled real estate, or actually changing the way government works, governance. So there's a career shift that's happening, and that's not an uncommon outcome for some people, is that they're beginning to orient on a career shift to move from their existing job to something else. Aaron, Sean, though?
I'd like to share a couple case stories just to paint a fuller picture of what we get inspired by, because we hear about these stories all the time. So we have folks that are building worker-owned farms that come out of the cohort. We have folks that are building non-extractive, community-governed, community-controlled loan funds. Particularly, one of our alumni is working in Puerto Rico to build a decolonial or anti-colonial investment fund for the rebuild and non-extractive housing. We have another of our alumni that's working on that in indigenous communities in Alaska and the Pacific Northwest. And so those are a couple that came to mind that I wanted to highlight. We've also had a number of our alumni are working in the kind of consumer packaged goods space and seeking to build companies that reflect the values that are providing some form of consumer good to the market in new and novel ways. So that's also something that some of our alumni do. We have folks working in nonprofits. We have folks working in government. So there's a number of and we already mentioned kind of cooperatives as well. Is that helpful, Ben?
Yes, that is. And also thank you for sharing the link. I will go there and Jeanette to take a look at it, the stories.
Oh, Kevin, you might be muted.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Any other questions that are live? We have a few more that are pre-seeded that we can address. And watching the time a little bit, I can extend a little bit to address some of the pre-seeded questions for anybody who's planning to watch the recording, so we can go through them afterwards. So let's work with what's here. Does anybody have any questions? Curiosity. Okay, I'm going to try and go to some of the pre-seeded questions and try and do a little weave together. So I'll start with one. For example, somebody asked, like, what is the curriculum? And so the general arc is that the first 6 sessions are where we explore kind of developing a shared language of like what's possible in the next economy, what's broken and not really working in the business as usual economy, what cultural shifts and transformations and structures are really needed. And then there's a session 6 on how do we design our lives to fit into that arc of transformation. So I would call that like getting alignment on the what's possible for the next economy in the context of what's not working in the business as usual economy from a principle-based approach. Sessions 7 through 16 are more what we would call like nuts and bolts, literacy about how to apply those next economy principles to organization design. And when I say organization design, it was already highlighted in this call that it's not just co-ops or nonprofits or B Corps or you know, LLCs and corporations with fair trade and solidarity economy sympathies. It's a number of different next economy institutions is what we call. And so how do we design them and also organize their activities and operations? So we offer a lot of case studies and examples. We have templates that we've used with our clients over the years. We've worked with, as Aaron mentioned, hundreds of organizations, all in the application of principles. An example to weave in another question, somebody says, like, are we going to learn ways to raise capital? And so I mentioned that sessions 7 through 16 are like literacy. So in the sense of like, we will cover the alternatives to business as usual and an understanding of like how business as usual goes about in terms of capital formation and capital raising and fundraising, but we'll make some distinctions that could be important. When I say it's like a literacy course, it's more like, hey, I didn't even know that that was possible. I didn't know that a regulation crowdfunding was possible. How do I go about that? What do I need to do from a compliance perspective? Or I didn't know that I could do revenue-based financing. All I knew was that there was equity and debt. What is the possibility of those kind of terms? And how would I structure it? And why would it be harmful to do a SAFE? You know, why might that lead down a path that doesn't actually work for community control or governance or other expressions of the next economy principles? So there's like, and then there's some how-to of like, how do you find investors that are willing to consider alternative terms and structured exits? And some of the terminology and jargon here, again, I might be using, that's some of what we unpack and explore together. So if you're like, I'm not familiar with those terms, that's fine. That's, we go through those together. The one distinction I would say like that, the question like how do we raise capital and like a distinction for the course is the competency of like going through the process of actually going and raising capital. There's a lot to potentially learn depending on your starting point or your entry point into that discussion. So for example, we have a self-study training we created that's an elaboration of the 90-minute facilitated session and what comes up in the office hours. And that's 9 hours of content that's more like about how to go through all the steps to raise capital. So there's a lot that we could cover in a lot of detail, but the training gives you that, like, I didn't know what I didn't know, and now I know, right? So like there's a literacy about what's possible with case stories to animate what's possible. The building up the competency to do some of the things will require skills and competency building will require more time than is allotted in the 9 month 18 session training. So just wanted to be candid about that. And real quick, I'll finish off and I see Katrina on Stack. Sessions 17 and 18 are back to the big picture about systems transformation, how the institutions that we're designing could fit into the dismantling racialized capitalism. And then the last session, big picture, is like what's next for the next economy? What are some of the big systems that need to transform along with the economy? And how do we go about that? Katrina, I see you on Stack, and I see a question from Matthew too. Katrina?
Great, thank you. This is so nice to go a little bit deeper dive into the curriculum, and so great to see your faces. And congratulations, Aaron, on the recent commitment and baby. So my question is building on what you were just saying on the second to last of the chunk of sessions relating to the investors or, you know, raising capital. And it sounds like there's a lot of great material. Is there within that, you know, kind of prepping people on how to work with investors, or, you know, like some role play opportunities, or, you know, just kind of like the maybe working with the alumni or some of the affinity groups to be able to like really kind of try it out before diving in?
Most definitely. So office hours are a great place where people often bring, like, here's my circumstance. I need to raise, you know, $2.5 million to do such and such. Here's my, you know, here's the requirements that I need. Help me develop terms. What kind of terms should I be offering? Why would one set of terms be beneficial over another? Can I like role play and like do my pitch, and can you provide feedback as a group in terms of what's working or what's not? Office hours is a great spot for that. There is an affinity group on regenerative finance where we just had a session just the other day where we were using a combination of somebody's actual organization and then a hypothetical that's a little bit further along to map out, like, how do I set a valuation if I am going to raise equity from the community, which is a big, like, really powerful, profound question with lots of implications. And so we used most of the time in the affinity group to kind of go over that. So there's a couple of opportunities. The other thing that can happen at any time is finding within high-low, you could solicit the cohort or the alumni to say, hey, can I get a feedback round on my pitch? You know, and there are impact investors sometimes in the cohort, certainly in the alumni, people who are representing that role who could provide really good quality feedback. And there's also, I should mention, there is always opportunity for one-on-one. So sometimes there's a scheduling out in time, but I've never turned down anybody's request for a one-on-one or facilitation. So somebody who's in the training and they're like, hey, I'd like to get some one-on-one feedback or coaching or guidance, that can happen, you know, ad hoc as needed, you know, within reason of time. So those are all possibilities there. Sean, anything or Aaron, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think you covered it.
There is a question in the chat that Ali posed, and I know Matthew is on stack as well. It's a quick response to Ali's question around when does or did early bird pricing end. It was 2 weeks ago, but we also have a policy, no one turned away for lack of funds. So, you know, let us know if there's ways that we can make the program accessible. So, you know, reach out, that sort of thing. And we'll do what we can. So I just wanted to mention that. And then Matthew, maybe I could kick off a response to Matthew's question because I do need to leave pretty soon after the hour. So Matthew, thank you so much for asking this question. Can you say more about the working groups such as Next Health, Next Education? Yes, Next Home. So we have both working groups, and we also have sort of more internal lift research projects around Next Infrastructure. So one of those projects was in 2019. That was inspired by a lot of conversations that we had from MBA participants around this quandary or dilemma that folks had around provisioning retirement savings to their cooperatives or companies and feeling like, oh gosh, that's really not values aligned for me to offer a 401k because where is that money going? Most of it's being invested in fossil fuel funds, deforestation funds, speculative real estate market. That's counter to a livable future for us to retire to. And so in 2019, we started a project with the Sustainable Economies Law Center called the Next Egg. And we've been working since that time on building awareness around how people can move their capital out of retirement funds and really reimagine how we do retirement in this country. That project is now a project of Lift Economy, and we have a new community manager who is really starting full-time in September. And we're doing stay tuned from the marketing standpoint on our newsletter, because there's some exciting partnerships that are coming up around that retirement, including working with celebrity Jane Fonda on a virtual mobilization campaign around raising awareness around retirement. So, but in general, the thread is, what is the infrastructure that this federated communities working on the next economy needs to build to support companies in provisioning quality benefits and quality support systems for healthcare, housing, food, retirement that are categorically different from the business as usual mainstream ways that we're doing that today, which in the healthcare space, we know that most of the resources that are going into health insurance is going to prop up CEO salaries, because that's how the health insurance and health care provider is structured. Care provision is structured. We know that a lot of the medicine is disease care rather than wellness based. It's not preventative, it's pharma first. And so we have a research initiative that's more of an internal lift research initiative around levers within the healthcare industry. And this would be something that, you know, if there was a lot of interest from an alumni community, we could create an affinity group to work on Next Health as an example. So hopefully that was, I'd pass it to Kevin or Sean or Jeanette to add anything about that.
I could maybe pass back to Matthew. Matthew, is there anything you want to elaborate on that question?
Well, I thought I'd like to follow up about that specifically, because I'm very interested in that particular project, but I don't know if it's like for this group per se.
Reach out to, I'll drop my email and we can connect on it.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other live questions, or we can go to making sure we address all the preceded questions for those who plan on viewing the recording. Okay, let's grab some of the questions, preceded questions. Somebody asked, can it be done while holding down a full-time job? I think Susie mentioned, I would say the majority of participants do work full-time. So I know it can be difficult to do both the office hours and the sessions. We've tried to organize them at times when it might be doable to do it while one has a job. Lunch breaks and other possibilities. But yeah, I would say Sean, do you think it's the majority have a full-time job? Does that sound right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think it is possible. There's, I guess, with all the different session, the 90-minute sessions, the 1-hour office hours, the racial justice caucuses, the extra fun, the optional, the affinity groups, the special sessions. On average, over time, we've kind of looked at the 9 months. On average, a participant would maybe commit 2 to 2.5 hours a week on average. And some of that is optional, or much of that is optional. And of course, since the sessions are recorded, that can be done kind of at the whenever you have time, according to your schedule. Some other questions that were asked. Is this an accredited MBA program? Who recognizes the MBA? My team hates it when I say this, but I used to joke like that it's about as accredited as Trump University, which means it's not. I like feel like these bad looks. It's not an accredited program. It's independent. Something we've actually been cautioned against doing an accredited program. So the plan is to stay independent for now. So why call it an MBA, or what Next Economy MBA? The content that we compiled for this training can basically be thought of as like all the topics that we could not find in any institutional MBA program. So even the sustainable MBA programs at places like Presidio Graduate School and Bainbridge University and so forth, we could not really find the topics that we cover in any curriculum of any institutional MBA. So like the things that we think are really critical to the development of an economy that works for the benefit of all life, that's what we've tried to focus on. And so somebody had the creative idea, well, this is like a next economy MBA, which is all the things that you would want to have in your MBA training, but never were able to have. Somebody asked, like, who recognizes the MBA? And I think in the spirit of, like, is it recognized, is it a prerequisite for jobs? Like, oh, do you have an next economy MBA? Is it recognized by any formal institutions? I don't think it is. That may change in the future. Certainly, there might be organizations that we partnered with quite a bit that would be familiar with it, but those would be everything from the Boston UGMA project to the Sustainable Economies Law Center. There's a familiarity, but so a recognition in that sense, but it's not a credential that would be necessarily universally recognized in any like general business as usual context. Sean, I don't, you might see it differently.
I would say it would just be similar to any other course or training that you would take, that you might say, hey, I did this training, you know, like I did a yoga teacher training, I did a nonviolent communication training, I did a next economy MBA training. You know, if you want to compare it like academically, it would be like a kind of 5 credit hour academic course, you know, so kind of like a heavy academic course for one semester. But of course we have it over 9 months, so it's you know, easier to fit in with a busy life.
Kind of building on that, somebody says, how will I be able to list it on my resume? Recently, thank you, Jeanette. Jeanette created an opportunity so people could list it on LinkedIn as a way to be able to list it on the resume, or like Sean mentioned, if it's just a paper or online resume, you could list it as a certificate program, like maybe any other credential or certificate that's unaccredited. I don't know, Sean or Jeanette, if there's anything else to say about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, we started it because we saw alumni were putting it on their LinkedIn, so Jeanette created like just kind of centralize that.
Ben asks also, what framework or principles is the curriculum designed on? Great question. And there's another question that was preceded as to, like, do we encompass solidarity economy and open source economics in the training? So I would say that the direct response to that one is, like, the principles are sympathetic with solidarity economy and open source principles, and are informed by partner organizations that we've worked with. The Just Transition principle framework developed by Movement Generation, to name one, that have informed a lot of our thinking. There's other organizations that have put thought leadership out about economic transformation, systems transformation. Meg Wheatley and Deborah Fries of the Bracana Institute has heavily informed our principled approach. But the development, the design of the principles in large part comes from our lived experience. Aaron mentioned Lift Economy. We started at providing just technical assistance to, and you know, it's pretty clumsy, just using our skills and experiences to try and help people who are passionate about providing needed goods and services for their community, but doing it in a way that's distinct from the norms and traps of the business as usual economy that tend towards exploitation, disenfranchisement of people, and exploitation of the planet. And so in the process of helping organizations to do business different, to do enterprise different, to provide needed goods and services to their communities in a way that don't fall into those traps, you know, we both learned and then shared from our lived experience about all the different ways to organize, you know, your organization in ways that are inclusive and have power with, or shared power rather than power over, that focus on open sourcing intellectual contribution rather than closing off intellectual property to wield it as a tool of economic exploitation, but also to do that in a way that protects innovation so that it doesn't lead to exploitation outcomes. We learned the power of transparency and open book management for enabling shared power and trust and community participation. We learned a lot from our lived experience about, looking at the whole system of interactions of delivering any good or service in terms of the regenerative potential. So moving beyond the idea of sustainability, but developing goods and services in ways that are beneficial to the carbon cycle, beneficial to biodiversity, beneficial to the hydrologic cycle, beneficial to life, and also how organizations can participate in broader systems change, whether that's through creating a nonprofit affiliate or actually doing advocacy or paying their employees to do policy development and advocacy. Just like business as usual companies do, but they usually do it for perverse outcomes. More money is spent on lobbying and all that kind of stuff. So all those examples I just offered are what the principles, and then the honest answer is it just developed from our work of working with now hundreds of organizations and kind of seeing how they were trying and failing and then succeeding in being the highest potential impact that they could have. And then there's a creative marriage between our observations and lived experience in our work with some of the frameworks developed by, whether it's movement generation, democracy collaborative, other principles. Sean,
other inspirations on our team: permaculture design, progressive utilization theory, human-centered design, systems thinking, scientific method. Those are some of them, but pretty I guess diverse and kind of integrate. Yeah, Kate Raworth, Donut Economics, great. And it's like, and largely seeing like a lot of parallels between all these, right? They're kind of different articulations of different aspects. And so, as Kevin's saying, kind of through our lived experience, we're just kind of integrating those into the training without being like, I guess, maybe overly or singularly influenced by any one of them, but more of like, this is consciousness evolving, expressing through humans who are writing it and propounding it in different ways. So,
which is a tie into why we call it the next economy, just for edification. Like, we call it the next economy because it's in the times we have where there are crises that are actually existential to human life that we're living through. I know every society probably has apocalyptic stories of the end of civilization and the end of society, but we are living, I think, in a unique time of acceleration where there are existential threats. If anybody's having a warm summer, just it's powerful and profound and frightening to reflect on that it's going to be the coolest summer for the rest of our lives and our lives of our children and our grandchildren with what's already set in motion. And so in this time of existential, if there is to be a livable future for Homo sapiens, and there is to be an economy, it actually has to work for the benefit of all life. And so it's next de facto. The next economy, and these, like Sean said, these principles aren't ours. They're like the contribution of humanity. Oh, and I would be remiss not to mention that many of the principles, or in some cases, all of them, is based on indigenous wisdom traditions, traditional ecological knowledge. And we've had participants in the training that represent identities of being embedded in indigenous tribal community who have provided feedback and audited and contributed to the development of the principles. So the principles aren't static either. So we've evolved the principles in the training from cohort 1 now to cohort 10. They continue to be informed by the participants. So if you choose to enroll in the training, you could potentially influence evolution of the principles as well. Sean, I think we've got most.
There's just a little bit of cleanup, just so I feel like we hit them all. Pivot tables
I
and
think that was a joke.
spreadsheet. Is it a joke? Total joke?
I think it was a joke.
Okay.
Somebody wrote in like, how do pivot tables work, and is there a crystal that can help me? I think that was a joke.
We do a lot of spreadsheets, but we don't go really deep on how to train them. But again, that can come into office hours. Starting a farm, would this help? Yes, really any business, right, with a vision for creating a better world. Great fit. What else here? A year-long program for first-year students developing business plans. Yeah, good fit. For developing infrastructure for scaling a fair trade compatible business. Yep. Good fit. Did we cover some of the logistics costs and?
I think cost and accessibility. I mean, maybe just quickly go over it. So the training costs $4,500 for the 9-month program. If you self-identify as a person of color, the cost is $2,500. Aaron mentioned this, so we value accessibility. We've never turned anybody away for lack of financial capacity. So if tuition is a barrier to your participation, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We do have, kind of de facto financing in that there are installment plans, tuition installments for people who want to pay over time. And that monthly installment, there's some kind of pre-developed pricing, but we can adjust that specific monthly amount and do it over time if it's more accessible. And if some form of scholarship is what is required in order to be able to participate, please just reach out to us and be in relationship. We value the relationship more than the privileging of the tuition reciprocity. There's many ways to be in a relationship.
Only last thing I see is guest speakers. We introduced ourselves obviously as the facilitators. Let's see, we have 2 folks that have come to a lot of the sessions. Jenny Casson is an attorney specializing in innovative fundraising strategies, and Nia Evans is the director of Boston Ujima. They're both have sessions that they come to, and then often the special sessions would feature a guest speaker.
And maybe one last one, just a quick elaboration on your response to one question that was preceded. If you're developing a program for undergrads or first-year students or high schoolers or whatever the case may be, and you want to reuse the templates and the materials, again, we have a Creative Commons that's totally encouraged. We've had other participants use the materials for their own teaching and education programming.
I see a last question here from Matthew. Thanks, Matthew. Do you have preferences for the systems you teach in certain business areas? For example, preferring sociocracy over policy governance, or do you strive to be neutral? There's definitely a somewhat of a preference for neutrality, as long again as the impact and the purpose is aligned. And it's more like we see our roles as like, here's kind of the menu of options that we see teams using successfully, rather than you should, for example, I'm personally biased as worker co-ops, but I almost never tell people to do a worker co-op because I see you shake. Most people shouldn't. It's really hard. So it's not just like something to shove people in. So it's more, trying to listen, be responsive, help people navigate choices. So that's really kind of our what we see our role here, and that's also the orientation of the course is kind of like a broad literacy. So anybody either working or running an organization, you get sensitized to all of the things that you might address at some point, but probably not right now.
The only thing I'd add to that is Matthew, and like spot on like this question of like governance frameworks. as an example. So when we maybe share the menu, but take governance as an example, when we animate the possibilities with a case story, we'll usually pick something that is something that we see as most functional for the expression of Nexus economy principles. In the case of governance, we do highlight a case story on sociocratic process, or there's another case story we share about, well, at the very least, we make distinctions between, consent, consensus, but with an emphasis on dialogue and deliberation and either circle structure. So we might contrast holacracy, sociocracy, and other structures that are more general expressions of shared power. And then the case story, there is a bias to pick ones that are the ones that we think are best able to express the principles or the least known. So it's like, oh, I didn't even know that was possible. Okay, so we'll share that. Okay. Any other questions?
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Made it to the beautiful end.
We have, if you have more questions that come up, we have one more of the live sessions. So in a couple weeks, Jeanette, is it? I think it's on a Monday.
August 28th. It is a Monday, same time.
Yeah, and if you have any particular questions that are inappropriate to share online, or you don't feel comfortable sharing and you want to reach out, Sean put his email address. You can email any one of us directly and you can respond one-on-one.
Thank you. This is
Thanks,
really
friends. Thanks for your great work.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
All right, I'll be reaching out, guys.
Okay. Good to see
All right.
you.
So.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.